Hi, I'm Tia with Badass Therapy, and I want to thank you for joining me again. So, this is video 3 of 6. So, hopefully, you've had a chance to watch the other two. So, right now, we're going to talk about cues of life threat. So, little, our biology lessons that we start with here, right? So, one of the main nerves of the parasympathetic nervous system, remember, parasympathetic nervous system is the system that typically helps us when we're having, just sort of ordinary life situations. So, one of the main nerves of that is the vagus nerve. So, the vagus nerve has sensory functions and motor functions, meaning it's, sensing the world around us and it's moving our physical body. There are two main parts of the vagus nerve, the dorsal vagus and the ventral vagus. So, the dorsal vagus nerve is responsible for subdiaphragmatic body functions, right? So, meaning below our diaphragm. So, that is things like our digestive system, which stays shut off when the dorsal vagus nerve is in charge, right? It turns off our digestion and turns off our reproduction, right? Those systems. This is why folks who have been in states of stress for a really long time tend to have digestive problems. They tend to have issues with reproduction. They tend to have issues with breathing because those systems have impacted those right, this dorsal vagus nerve has impacted those systems for so long that we tend to start to see issues. So one of the assessments I do for the Safe and Sound protocol is looking at how much do you have hypersensitivity to, these vagus nerve functions. So when our body perceives something that it has decided is a life threat, or when the challenge that we've faced, right, the stress that we've faced is too long, or it's too intense for our sympathetic nervous system to respond to. Our body responds to that by activating our dorsal vagus nerve and turning off our ventral vagus and our sympathetic nervous systems. So, right, I'm having a stressful day and it keeps going for too long. Eventually, I'm going to kick into this dorsal vagus. And ventral vagus is this idea of like our safe and social. Sympathetic, right, is that kind of fight or flighty. I'm going to be, moving to do something to protect myself. And so if it's too intense, right? So oftentimes for clients with intense, particularly interpersonal trauma, they'll sort of check out, right? They'll go into this dorsal vagus, right? So where it's too intense, right? Where I think that mobilizing, right, doing something to try to protect myself, if my body has decided that's not going to work, then we kick into this dorsal vagus, right? So if it's happening for too long, if it's too intense, or if my body from the beginning has just decided, like, hey, we're going to die in this situation, like, we have to do everything we can to make sure that we don't, then that kicks us into this dorsal vagus, right? This is a survival response. So, one of my favorite facts about the dorsal vagus that really helped me to understand things is that it changes the blood flow in the body. Right? It moves our blood away from our arms and our legs. This is why oftentimes people can tell that they're in dorsal vagus because they get really cold, right? Your body moves all of your blood flow to the center of your body because it wants to make sure that you don't bleed out if that wolf or bear, scratches your arm or chews off your leg. It also decreases our sensation of pain, right? So this is planning that we're going to get attacked, we're going to get hurt badly. And so it turns off our sensations of pain, right? If that wolf is ripping off my leg, right, I'm not feeling anything. Like, it doesn't hurt. And so you'll see this sometimes with folks where they'll have horrific car accidents and they'll be like, I feel fine, it's great. And then, in 20 minutes, when those systems have turned back off and they've kicked back into sympathetic, right, then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, this hurts horribly. And so those are things to kind of pay attention to in your own experience. Right, when we're talking about this idea of stressors being too long, right, neuroception, part of what it pays attention to is our own body's cues of safety or danger. One of our cues of safety or danger is pain. So lots of people who have chronic pain, they kick into dorsal vagal more often because it helps them to manage their pain. They don't feel it as much, right? Also, that extended period of pain, your body starts to think that your sympathetic nervous system can't fight it, it can't run from it, and so it's just going to kind of shut off and make sure that you don't die. So it's this really interesting thing where it helps manage chronic pain, but then people end up with other challenges, right? They end up with digestive problems, they end up with those reproductive issues because their bodies shut those systems off for so long. So in this, the body enters conservation mode, right? So it slows all your systems down as much as possible. It slows down everything that you're doing, right? And it protects you through disappearing. So where we have that deer in the headlights freeze, where like everything's amped up, right? And you're ready to respond and you're ready to fight and you're ready to run away and you're ready to do something. This is freeze with collapse, right? So this is where you see the, person in the tiny little ball. This is where, they're not talking, they're not responding. You can't even necessarily tell that they're breathing, right? These pieces. So again, we're looking at identifying what these experiences look like for ourselves so that we can recognize when we're in one or another, so that we know how to respond to those things, and so that we can communicate them to our friends, our family, our therapists. So when you're in dorsal vagal, you might feel zoned out, shut down, not aware of your surroundings, immobilized, disconnected, numb, collapsed, drained, floating, alone, lost, abandoned, hopeless, invisible, dissociated. So dissociation is a really interesting thing, right? So most of my clients kind of describe it as being checked out. From what I have seen, most people can't pick up on dissociation when it's the really subtle levels of dissociation. But when it's the like blatant, like blank stare kind of checkout of dissociation, then when it's those more extreme versions, people can kind of notice it. There just starts to be this feeling, right? For me, when I'm sitting with somebody who's dissociated, I just start to feel like they're not there. Like, I don't know where they went, but they're not there, right? So oftentimes my question to people when they're dissociated is, hey, where did you go? Oftentimes what I see is that dissociation is this ability to sort of check out from body parts, check out from your body, check out from your environment, check out from connecting with other people. Some people describe it as sort of feeling outside of their body, where they're just sort of watching what's happening from out there. Some people describe it as sort of seeing their own body from outside. So there's all sorts of different levels of dissociation. What I talk to a lot of my clients about is that dissociation is beautiful, right? It gets people through horrific events that happen to them. And it completely changes things, right? Like, I'm not there, so it's not that uncomfortable. And so we don't want it to be something where you don't get to dissociate anymore, right? That is a defense response that your body created in order to protect you. And so we want you to be able to have the option to choose whether to dissociate, right? So I dissociate when I go to the dentist and they're hurting me, right? When I had to have surgery on my face, right? I use dissociation. And so we want to add additional tools, right? We want you to be in control a bit more. Again, this involves that choice of, having to retrain your body for cues of safety. Dissociation is kind of a weird one, but it's definitely something that I work with clients about quite a bit. So again, right, Deb Dana is talking about this idea of figuring out what does this look like for you, right? So that you can communicate with others about it. So think about a time that you felt that more collapsed, that you felt that more numb. What does your body feel like when you feel this way, when this happens? What do you do? How do you feel? What are your emotions right now? What are you thinking about? How does your sleep change when you're in this checked out place? Your eating, your substance use, any compulsive addictive behaviors like sugar, alcohol, tobacco. What color would describe this state for you? If you were to call this something else, what would you call it? So in our example from before, this might be foggy. When you're in this space, how would you complete the sentences? I am. The world is. What does your nervous system need in this moment to find the way home to being safe and social and anchoring there? Right? That's my primary place to be. So again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And this is video 3 of 6. And so I hope you join me for video 4 of 6, which is talking about how we are when we're in that safe and social space.